With so many first-person shooters out there, it can be hard to find games that stand out. There are rarely any first-person shooters that are able to stand out, especially within a gaming industry with so many first-person shooters, that if taken together would look almost identical. However, some stand out over time because of their gameplay and community. Although not all can stand out, and even fewer are held to universal approval, this series has arguably been able to do both. This series being Counter-Strike. Counter-Strike's history starts with one of its creators, Min Lee. In 1996, Quake was released, and a software development kit for Quake was released later on in the year. Lee was in his first year of university during both releases, and worked to make his project with the Quake engine, which was a game called Navy SEALs. It seemed to be a realistic first-person shooter, and following that he continued making mods for Quake, eventually joining a group of Quake 2 mod developers called the A-Team, who worked on the mod Action Quake 2. During his time working with the A-Team, he met Jeff Cliff. Lee and Cliff got along, and Lee shared his plans for a mod. Cliff liked the idea for the mod, and both of them worked together on this project. This project was going to be set in the Gold Source engine, since Lee wanted to try something new, rather than sticking to the Quake engine. The Gold Source engine was a heavily modified version of the Quake engine made by Valve Software for their first project, Half-Life. Valve encouraged modding, and it is shown due to leaving software necessary to modify Half-Life very available. For example, Valve's level creation tool, Worldcraft, later known as Hammer, is available to use since a full version of the software came with Half-Life, and additionally, later on, Valve would release a software development kit for the Gold Source engine. However, at the time that Lee had chosen to work with the engine, the software development kit was only announced and had not been released, so Lee worked on character models while he waited. Once the software development kit was available, it took Lee about a month and a half to program and integrate his models for beta 1 of his new mod. He decided to name it Counter-Strike, but it didn't always have that name. In early March of 1999, Lee and Cliff discussed possible names like Frag Forces, Spec Ops Elite, International World Soldiers, and Counter-Terrorist Forces. Lee liked Counter-Terrorist Forces, however, Cliff thought it was too long, and thought Counter-Strike was a better name for it. Lee liked the name and agreed that this would be the final name for his mod. However, this wasn't the only thing that Cliff did for the mod. Cliff previously managed the website for Action Quake 2, and when he heard about the idea for Counter-Strike, he offered to make and manage the website, which he did in late March of 1999. And the website was used to give updates and announcements for Counter-Strike. And on June 19th, the Counter-Strike beta was released. With the release of Counter-Strike's beta came 2 player models, one for the terrorist and the other for the counter-terrorist side, as well as 9 weapons and 4 hostage maps. This may seem like very little compared to later versions of Counter-Strike. However, this was only the first beta. There would be about 18 more versions of beta, with each version adding more maps, weapons, and general content for the mod. And the mod gained more updates and versions as it aged. It became more and more popular as well, to the point where it was one of, if not the biggest online multiplayer game / mod. Additionally, Lee joined Barking Dog Studios, who was doing some work with Valve Software around the time of Beta 4 of Counter-Strike. When Valve heard that Lee was working with Barking Dog Studios, Valve offered to finance the development of Beta 5 if they worked with Lee to make this version. Barking Dogs agreed to help with the development of Beta 5 and would do 90% of the development since Lee was busy in university. Furthermore, Valve became more involved with the development of the mod by providing code as well as new hostage models. So with the continued development, Beta 5 dropped in December of 1999, and Beta 6 dropped in March of 2000. And in April of 2000, Valve and the Counter-Strike team announced a partnership, and that Counter-Strike 1.0 would be included in a Half-Life patch. Additionally, Although this was never confirmed, it was later assumed that this announcement also meant Valve acquired the rights to Counter-Strike, primarily due to later statements on the relationship between Valve and the CS team. Furthermore, Valve announced in late August of 2000 that Counter-Strike would be released as its own retail product, and in November of 2000, it was released as its own retail product, and the mod had finally left beta. And with the mod finally out of beta, development continued on it, although with less focus on new content for the game, but more focus on fixes. With the final version of mod, Counter-Strike 1.6, being the last version of the mod. The game would still get fixes, however they wouldn't have to be downloaded from Counter-Strike's site, but rather the game would be updated via Steam, which is Valve's game distribution platform. And additionally, the game received the port for the original Xbox in 2003. Of course, when you have a game as popular as Counter-Strike, questions and thoughts for a sequel would be in many people's mind. And it certainly was in the mind of Lee. During his time at Valve, he focused on Counter-Strike based projects, one of which was Counter-Strike 2. It was in development at least for a while, but the project was put on hold and eventually shelved. However, that's not to say there wasn't going to be a new Counter-Strike game, because there was a new Counter-Strike game in the works. This game's development started sometime in 2000. The development for the game originally was done by Rogue Entertainment. However, Rogue went defunct, leaving Valve with very little and the project delayed. So Valve handed over development to Gearbox Software. Gearbox did a full rehaul of the game with high quality models and graphics. However, for some reason, Valve swapped development for a third time around 2002, causing yet another delay. This time the game's development went from Gearbox to Ritual Entertainment. Ritual started development on this Counter-Strike game. However, the AI for the game was made by then recent startup Turtle Rock Studios. This iteration of the game was almost released in late 2003. However, Valve made the decision to hand the game from Ritual Entertainment to Turtle Rock, primarily because before the game's release, internal Valve playtests and additional early reviews praised Turtle Rock's AI, while Ritual's design came back with shortcomings. Luckily, Turtle Rock's iteration was the last version of this project, and the game was announced in early October of 2003. The game's name, Counter-Strike Condition Zero. With it, its release dates of October 10th for retail and November 18th on Steam. However, Condition Zero, only one day after its announcement, was leaked along with the rest of Valve's internal servers, due to the infamous 2003 server leak. And that wasn't the end of Condition Zero's bad news. The game was delayed again, this time due to additional work being needed for foreign versions of the game, at least according to Jeff Cliff. Furthermore, a second leak of Condition Zero happened in January of 2004. However, the game was announced again in February of 2004, this time with a launch date of March 23rd, and luckily for Condition Zero, it was released on March 23rd. Condition Zero wasn't received amazingly nor terribly. It was okay. It was given rates that ranged from 6 out of 10 to at max 7 out of 10. This was mainly due to the game itself. Its maps and AI were universally seen as good or great. However, pretty much everything else in the game was since everything was pretty much the same as the original Counter-Strike with just some fixes, some improvements, and some new features. However, with the weight and high expectations for the game, just for the game to be the original Counter-Strike with very little that was new, resulted in a lot of okay reviews. Even with the okay reviews, Condition Zero isn't done, and Valve ended up releasing Condition Zero deleted scenes, which had levels and weapons that were developed by Ritual Entertainment early on. However, Condition Zero and deleted scenes weren't the only Counter-Strike projects in 2004. The next Counter-Strike game was put in beta in early August of 2004. The beta at first was only available to members of Valve's Cyber Cafe, Then a couple days later, it was available to owners of Condition Zero and owners of certain ATI graphics cards. The game was released on October 7th, 2004. The name? Counter-Strike Source. It was a remake of the original Counter-Strike, but on Valve's new in-house game engine, Source. It also was the first game under the new engine, and the game was received very well due to all the improvements compared to the original Counter-Strike. Additionally, the game was given out to anyone who pre-ordered Half-Life 2. However, we're not done with Counter-Strike. Following CS Source's release, another Counter-Strike game was in the works. However, this game was really a spin-off and only available in Japan. This spin-off was made by Japanese game developer Namco, titled Counter-Strike Neo. It was an arcade game originally released in 2003, with an updated version in 2005. It was a Counter-Strike game adjusted to suit the Japanese market. However, for Counter-Strike, this wasn't the only news in the mid-2000s. In 2006, Min Lee left Valve to work on his own project, and in 2008, another CS arcade game was released, called Counter-Strike Online. It was an arcade game tailored for the general market of Asia, this time developed by South Korean developer Nexion, with another arcade spin-off released in 2014, called Counter-Strike Nexion Zombies. However, it wasn't just spin-offs for Counter-Strike. A new Counter-Strike game was released before Counter-Strike Nexion Zombies. In 2011, the next major Counter-Strike game was announced. It wasn't going to be a spin-off like the arcade games, and at first this new game was going to be a port of Counter-Strike Source for consoles, developed by Valve and Hidden Path Entertainment. However, it was turned into a new game with plans to expand on gameplay from Counter-Strike Source, and the world got to see a demonstration of the game at PAX Prime in August of 2011, and a closed beta happened in fall of that year. During PAX Prime and other expos, it was stated that this new game would be on consoles and would be cross-platform, since the game would be released for PC, Mac, PS3, Xbox 360, and Linux. Furthermore, it was later announced that this game would be released on August 21st of 2012, which it was. This new game, Counter-Strike Global Offensive, was released on all platforms it was mentioned in. However, it wasn't cross-platform, and the console versions didn't receive updates, while the PC, Mac, and Linux versions continued getting updated. CSGO had the same base gameplay mechanics as previous Counter-Strike games. However, the game had new weapons as well as new game modes. As for older weapons, game modes, and maps, they were updated and improved. However, that's not all Global Offensive had to offer. With some updates that came with the game, weapon skins, character skins, and other items were made available through unboxing, starting a trading economy for the game that is still going strong to this day. Of course, how could I mention Counter-Strike without covering the esports part of its history? I'll briefly cover its esports history since I couldn't do it full justice in this video. Esports have been connected with Counter-Strike ever since the original mod. However, the first major esports event for Counter-Strike seems to have been the 2001 Cyber Athlete Professional League Winter Championship, which offered $150,000 in prize money. However, the popularity of CS in competitive play was growing, at least till the release of Counter-Strike Source. Although Counter-Strike Source was technically better, at launch it had issues, and additionally it had some gameplay changes that lowered the skill ceiling, drawing people away. It drew people away because if you have an established formula that is universally loved, and a new version that feels off, most people will stick to the established version. So the competitive community of Counter-Strike was divided from the CS 1.6 players and the CS Source players. Due to this, and probably also the rise of multiplayer online arenas, the esports community of CS decreased in popularity from the late 2000s to early 2010s. However, hope for the Counter-Strike esports scene wasn't lost. With the release of CSGO, there was a chance for the CS community to come back and unite. However, at launch, the game wasn't received well, at least from the competitive community. It had bugs, poor mechanics, and was imbalanced. These issues were eventually fixed by Valve within the months following the release of the game. and an additional announcement of a $250,000 tournament being held by DreamHack with partnership from, most importantly, Valve. This tournament was validation of the CS esports and competitive scene from Valve. All this, coupled with some extremely epic moments in Counter-Strike's esports scene and a growing support from the community, teams, and even some organizers, helped blow up CSGO into one of the biggest esports and competitive scenes in the world. Counter-Strike. Two words that represent years of gaming, years of skill, years of fun, and years of history. It may not have expected to be big when it started off as a mod. However, now as a game and as a series, it's big and dominating. And chances are, it will stay that way.